I am Adrian Larson, and I'm pleased to also introduce my colleague, Kimberly Thompson. Say hi, Kimberly.
Good morning.
Or whatever it is, wherever you are.
Yes.
Today's webinar is the 3 most important keys to AcuGraph success. And so obviously, we're focusing on people that have AcuGraph. If you don't have AcuGraph yet, then I think you're going to find some really valuable information in this webinar today as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get rolling with it, and let's see how it goes. The 3 most important keys to AcuGraph success. And I want to point out that now we have a full-time designer working for us, which is why the quality of the presentations has gone up exponentially, and you'll find that things are looking a lot better. By the way, thanks for everybody that checked in where you're from. Hello, folks. Golly, we have Dallas, Portugal, Australia, Netherlands, Billings, Montana, France. Welcome. Welcome. We're glad you're here. All right. To jump in, I want to start by talking about why I chose this topic for the webinar this time. And it really comes down to something I'm a little bit embarrassed about. But I'll go ahead and I'll admit it. See, it turns out that there are AcuGraph users out there who, for whatever reason, have spent a pretty large sum of money to get themselves an AcuGraph, and then they get it back to their office and they never open the box. Now, it's not many, obviously, it's just a minority, but every now and then we'll run across someone who will come to one of our trainings or who will come to a webinar or something, and then they'll tell us, hey, I'm embarrassed to tell you I've never actually used AcuGraph and I've had it for 2 years. Well, that's always had me thinking that if we're doing such a great job selling it, that we can get people to spend that kind of money and buy a tool only to never actually open it, then it tells me that there's a deficiency in the training, that we need to help people get up, get started, and get a return on that investment. The last thing we want is people to have an AcuGraph that they've spent a couple of $1,000s on sitting in a box on their shelf. That doesn't reflect well on us, and it doesn't help them. So I put together this webinar because I want to address that problem and do something about it. Now, getting started with AcuGraph can sometimes be the largest hurdle, and we'll talk a little bit about why. But the goal here is that if we can help people get off to a good start, then everything else follows. And all the good that comes from AcuGraph really hinges on getting started right. And then the other thing is, there's a lot of talk lately in the acupuncture world, and maybe you've seen some of this, that acupuncturists really are struggling financially. There's some information going around that, frankly, it's hard or impossible to pay for an acupuncture education or pay off the student loans based on what you stand to make as an acupuncturist. It is a negative economic proposition to even go into acupuncture for many people. And I'd like to see that change. Acupuncture ought to be a rewarding career that allows someone to make a reasonable living so that they can help people. And because of that, it's important to me to let people know that AcuGraph users, according to the polling, make about 35% more than your typical acupuncturist. And that can make the difference between starving and being able to make a living at this. And so, although our first goal is never about money, when we're healers, our goal is to help people and bless people's lives, but you got to make a living doing it or you're not going to be a healer for long. So we want to help people get that return on the investment. And so what I've put together in the webinar today, these are the things that if you and I sat down for an hour and we got out your new AcuGraph and just talked it over, this is exactly what I would tell you. So I'm going to approach this as if you and I are sitting down and I'm showing you your AcuGraph, and we're going to talk about how to get started and how to succeed. So if that's fair enough, let's get into it. There's 3 tips that I want to share with you today because, the last thing you need is 18 tips for success. That's overwhelming. There's only 3 things I want you to remember from this webinar. Hopefully that doesn't exceed anyone's capacity. If you do these three things, you're going to be in good shape. Number one, the first takeaway I want is that when you use AcuGraph in your practice, you really are learning and implementing a brand new paradigm. What I mean by that is, presumably you went to acupuncture school and you probably spent somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 years getting an acupuncture degree. And then you had some undergrad. So you've got a lot of years invested in this, and you've been taught a certain paradigm and a certain way of thinking. And you were taught what you needed to do to pass the board exams so that you could go out and get a license. That's what acupuncture school is for. It's to pass the boards and get a license. And that's not a negative thing at all. That's what it should be for. But it's not necessarily going to teach you everything you need to know to be a successful acupuncturist and to run a successful business. And then the other thing is that acupuncture schools, at least those in the US, are almost all based on a theory called TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. Of course, you're all familiar with this. I don't need to explain that to you. But that's the paradigm you walk out of school with, the TCM paradigm. And when we talk about TCM, I somewhat tongue-in-cheek used to always say, well, TCM stands for traditional Chinese medicine, which is actually 3 lies in 1. Now, it's not really lies, but TCM is not necessarily 100% traditional, nor is it 100% Chinese, nor is it technically medicine. And so you have to realize that although TCM is great and powerful, and I have nothing negative to say about it, you also have to realize where it came from and what its limitations are. And so let's talk about that TCM paradigm just a little bit. Let's talk about the origins. The roots of modern TCM actually came about during the Communist Cultural Revolution under Chairman Mao, when the country was bankrupt after World War II. China economically was decimated, people were starving, and there was not much infrastructure, not much industry, not much of an economy. And so the communists came to power and tried to remedy that. And part of what they tried to do was establish industry, manufacturing, farming, try to get the country moving again. Well, there wasn't a lot of money for medicine or for medical care, for healthcare. And although there had been a big push in China to go to a Western style of healthcare, medical approach, there frankly just wasn't the money and the infrastructure to support it. There weren't doctors. There weren't schools to train doctors. There wasn't money for hospitals and surgical centers and drugs. And so in 1965, Chairman Mao gave an address to the country, and one of the things that he proposed turned into what's called barefoot doctors. And that was essentially that you would have doctors or healthcare professionals, let's say, that were common folk. Most of them were farmers, and they were trained for something between 6 months and 18 months in basic medical care, disease prevention, hygiene, some emergency medicine, paramedic type things. And they were sent out to provide healthcare because this was what the country could afford. And the life expectancy was 35 years. Can you imagine that, people? 35 years life expectancy for a population that big. Well, so the barefoot doctors, they were trained by the thousands and tens of thousands. They were sent out into the countryside. They still worked as, most of them, farmers up to 50% of the time, which actually gave them more credibility with the people they were serving because they were farmers too. And it did wonders. It did a lot of good. Well, as part of the training, they attempted to resurrect some of the traditional methods that had been neglected, forgotten, or minimized under the communist regime and during the 20th century. And so as they gathered together some of the various traditional healing methods, they were combined into a system so that they could be taught to these barefoot doctors. And during the attempts to systematize this, there were a lot of different approaches to healing that were considered and used. Herbs, acupuncture, body work, the spiritual aspects of shamanistic healing, you might call it. There were some ancient texts that needed to be considered, and some more ancient than others, and all of them had or featured different approaches to healing. And so when you're faced with all of these various approaches to healing, and you need to amalgamate it into a system that you can teach very quickly in a matter of a few months and send people out in the countryside to do good, well, what you ended up with is now what we call TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, which was not a phrase that was coined in China. Actually, that name was given by the Western press to what was being taught. And so it was all amalgamated into TCM, and you ended up with a mixture of ideas. You have some ideas that come from the world of herbs, concepts like damp or dry, hot or cold. These are not acupuncture concepts originally. These are herbal concepts that are included as part of TCM. You had some ideas about physical things, wind or phlegm or stagnation, physical concepts of what's going on in the body. You have spiritual ideas, evils or invasion of pathogenic energies. Sorry, like my slide skipped. Here we go. You had various energetic ideas like excess or deficiency, or the 5 elements paradigm of the Shen and Ko cycle. And this mixture of ideas then was all amalgamated into TCM. And of course, it included treatment methods, herbs, acupuncture, body work. All of those things came together. Well, with the new paradigm that you have to learn and you have to consider to be effective with AcuGraph, you really do need to focus on the meridians and focus on what is unique to healing about acupuncture itself, and not just the full panoply of TCM approaches. They are all related, and we're not trying to minimize them, but you really do have to take a meridian-based focus when you're working with AcuGraph. And I'm going to give you the reasons why you need to do that and how to do it successfully. So when you focus on the meridians, you need to focus on the internal function of what that channel does, the balance and the harmony with the other channels, and you need to consider it as if it's a network, like a power grid. I was just actually reading something that Kimberly taught, or that Kimberly put together. I was reading it this morning. And hey, Kimberly, thanks for popping back up. Something I learned from you today is the 8 different levels of each meridian, that there's very external and that there's increasing levels of internal, including the connections to the extraordinary vessels, the internal collaterals that connect the meridians together. And all of these things are part of a great big, I call it a grid, a network. And if I could, I'm going to, kind of offer an example. Pop my camera on over here and see what happens. Can I do this? Okay. So who's familiar with what the power grid is? Have you heard about that in the news a little bit? The power grid. And what it means, the power grid is actually the largest machine in the world. It is the connection between all of the various generators in a geographic area. Let's say the United States for our purposes. You have all these different generation stations. They may be wind powered, they may be solar, they may be a coal-fired power plant, a natural gas-fired, they may be geothermal, they may be hydroelectric. All of these different sources that are generating electricity scattered all over the country. And then, of course, every home, every business, every building that uses electricity. And then you have this massive grid of interconnection so that the electricity can get everywhere it needs to go. And if one generator goes offline, let's say the wind dies down and the windmills stop in one particular area, other generators come online or increase their output to compensate, so that you have all these different sources of energy and you have all these different destinations, and you have to keep everything imbalanced. And to do that, you have to have interconnections between everything, so that if the hydroelectric dam, and we're in Idaho where we live, and we have probably more hydroelectric than any other state. I believe that's true, which makes our electricity nice and cheap. But let's suppose the hydroelectric output in my area goes down, then we've got to have power coming from somewhere else. And so there's going to be automatic switching and load balancing that might pull in power that's generated in another state that is now coming in on broadcast lines or on high tension lines into Idaho. And that's what's powering us until the hydroelectric comes back on. So my point is, if you think about the meridians like that, if you have one meridian that's not doing its job, you have a failure in one part of the grid, you have other parts that are going to have to compensate for it. And if they can't fully compensate, you're going to have dysfunction where the failure is. And that, at its most basic level, is the paradigm you have to keep in mind when you're treating and thinking with AcuGraph. And it's the paradigm that you have to use when communicating with patients. Anything you would add to that, Kimberly, before we move on? Microphone? Oh, there we go.
There. I like to tell my patients, I do a quick little explanation of how acupuncture channels work. I typically show them where the large intestine channel goes, and this would be with a first visit. Mm-hmm. So I tell them where the acupuncture channel goes, and I tell them that essentially I can treat, if I'm going to treat points along that channel, I could obviously treat your finger, and I could treat your wrist, and I could treat your arm, your elbow, your neck, your shoulder, even your sinuses. And I just show them that basic understanding of the acupuncture channel. And then I like to show them the musculo channel, the musculoskeletal channel, and show them how it also connects with certain muscular areas. And then I show them the internal aspect of the channel. So I show them all three pictures, and then I tell them that there's also an emotional aspect involved as well. So that's my first introduction to the patient of the bigger picture of acupuncture. Okay. I have a chart on the wall. I say, here's the naked Chinese man with all of the acupuncture points all over his body. And I said, but really, my job is to be the master engineer. My job is to know and understand how all of these acupuncture points and internal pathways all come together in order to help you with the problems that you're presenting with. So AcuGraph is a great tool to be able to show that. And yes, as much as I talk about the simplicity of it to the patient, I tell them that it's my job to be the master engineer.
And how do they understand? Do they get that pretty quickly and easily?
Oh yeah, and this kind of a conversation happens on the very first visit when I have the patient in my treatment room for a long period of time where I'm not interacting with other patients. I really help them to realize how I'm looking at their body, and I use AcuGraph as the tool to show them. By showing them individual channels and then showing them how the pathway flows and how if energy is holding on in one channel, it's not moving to the next pathway where it needs to. So it helps them to understand that whole big picture. Mm-hmm. And I just had a patient yesterday who said to me, as we had been watching the progress in her graph and showing how things change, she goes, well, my brother gets acupuncture. And I know his acupuncturist is not as good as you because they don't have technology like this to show him. So he doesn't even know if he's getting better. I love it.
Nice. Okay, cool. Hey, thanks for sharing that. I'll jump back into the presentation here, and let's try that. It makes me click a bunch of things every time. Sorry. Something I'll add is that when you use that paradigm, then yeah, people readily understand it, and probably more readily than if you start talking about dampness in the spleen or liver qi stagnation, which there's nothing invalid about those concepts. But in the Western mindset, folks are just not going to get that. They're going to think you told them they have a liver problem. And the next thing they're telling their MD, yeah, my acupuncturist says that I have liver malfunction, and they go get blood work and the liver enzymes are fine. And the MD says, well, your acupuncturist is an idiot. And so if you couch it in terms of meridians and channels and energy, you avoid all that. So it's a network like a power grid. There's interconnection and support so that all parts of the network affect all other parts of the network. And this really is the basis of all the other philosophies and thoughts that are used in acupuncture. It doesn't matter what approach to acupuncture you eventually use. it's going to be based on the meridians and those connections. So when it comes to patient communication, you need a simple enough approach to communicate. And Kimberly just shared a great one that frankly could even be more simple. It depends on how thorough you want to be. I've literally seen a 30-second explanation of what acupuncture is and what acupuncture does that the patient is absolutely satisfied with and says, that sounds great. Let's go to work. I love this. So it doesn't have to be hard to communicate. But not only should you be able to communicate what you're doing, you should be able to demonstrate what you're doing. And that's the strength of AcuGraph. And that's the paradigm that we are hoping all of our practitioners will get in their heads, that it's not just about telling them, but it's also about showing them. There are a lot of analogies you can use. I just use the power grid analogy. There's plenty of other analogies. You can use a computer network. You can talk about telephones. There's a lot of ways to do it. But in the end, patients trust the technology. And if you can show them, then you're going to win the day. That is hands down the most important communication tool I have ever seen. No amount of talking is going to beat showing them, because a picture is worth what? 1,000 words. All right. Now, when you have this paradigm in mind that you're going to base your communication and even your diagnosis and treatment, you're going to start from the standpoint of meridian energetics. It's going to change your office flow. It really is. And I think this is the hurdle where some people get hung up, because they've been doing things a certain way and they're used to a certain way of functioning, a certain way of explaining. Trying to change that, especially when you're already in a practice and you have patients to see, some folks get hung up there. When you make this the basis of the visit, though, it meets patient expectations and it establishes patient expectations. Here's what I mean by that. When you get a new patient and they come to your office, and the very first thing that happens is that they're given this high-tech computerized test that shows the balance of the meridians, that provides a picture and provides an explanation, they have set an expectation in their mind that that's what acupuncture is about. Oh yeah, when I go to the acupuncturist, the first thing they do is test me to find out what's wrong, and then they fix it. It's wonderful. It would be kind of like, if you break your arm and you go to the hospital, your expectation is that they're going to take an x-ray before they're going to actually treat anything. And if they didn't do that, no matter how ignorant you are, you'd be like, wait a minute, you're trying to set a bone. Don't you need to x-ray this thing first, doc? By setting the expectations, you make it very easy to please your patients, because all you do is provide a consistent experience and they're happy. Now, this will change your flow by providing a graph at the beginning of each visit. It will change your office flow, but ultimately it increases your efficiency. And here's why. I've actually had testimonials from AcuGraph users that have said, once I started using AcuGraph to explain what was wrong and what I'm doing about it, the speed of my office visits increased exponentially. I could explain things so much faster. It literally took 30 seconds and we're off and running, and I didn't have to spend a lot of time talking or teaching acupuncture philosophy. So in the end, because your patient accepts this, expects it, and lets you get right to work, you will work faster. You will be able to see more patients in a day. And particularly once you get busy enough, you have an assistant that actually performs the exam, that does the graph, so that all you have to do is look at the graph, discuss the treatment, and go. It makes your office visit more efficient. So it doesn't need to change your philosophy. You don't have to actually abandon TCM at all. Quite the contrary. All it needs to do is change your communication. It gives you a new paradigm. So to recap, item number one, the takeaway number one from today is, this is a new paradigm. Now, AcuGraph can be used as a toy or a tool. And it's really up to you. You've got to decide. Those who view it as nothing but a marketing gimmick, and we've had plenty of users that buy it for that, that's fine. Market with it, get some patients. You will get benefit from doing so. but it is so much more. It is a communication tool. It is a tool that's going to help you come up with a better diagnosis. It's a tool to help track the results, demonstrate the results, and ultimately retain patients. So it's up to you, but I'm going to suggest that it's worth the time that you spend to actually implement this in your practice as a tool. Learning and implementing a new paradigm is always tough, but it only will take you a few days and you'll have it under your belt and it'll be normal and it'll be a habit. So it's a different way to practice, communicate, and think. The more you integrate it as part of your practice, the better you're going to do. And that, to me, that's, the best testimony I have of that is when we have practitioners who their computer goes down or whatever, they end up with a technical problem, they can't make their AcuGraph work. Sometimes they call us in a bit of a panic saying, this is the basis of my whole practice. I've got to have this up right now. I've got patients coming in and they expect this. And so we get them back up and everything's good. But I realize that this becomes a cornerstone for success. Kimberly, I see you popped back in. Do you have anything to add?
I like how you say a toy or a tool. I get to go to the acupuncture conventions all over the place. And when people come up to the booth, we have different modes of people who are looking at how AcuGraph can help them. Absolutely, hands down, the first thing that people recognize is, oh my gosh, patients are going to love this. And there are many who just use AcuGraph as a way to show the science base, just to bring in a whole bunch of new patients into their clinic. But then on that the next level up beyond that is that tool to totally explain acupuncture to your patients. And then you talked about the next level of the practitioner who calls in a panic. And they don't call in a panic because they don't know how to treat their patient. We all know how to treat patients just fine, but AcuGraph becomes their record-keeping system and everything else involved. And so I think that's the major panic is it becomes such a part of your system to make things flow easy that you don't want to be without it.
Unfortunately, it's rare that they go down, but yeah, thanks for that point. It's true. It's not that you don't know how to treat without it, but your patients are looking forward to it and you're looking forward to it. So
my patients would be disappointed if I didn't graph them because they love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Thanks for clarifying that. Now, there is a prior webinar called Streamlining Your Practice with AcuGraph 5. This is one that we taught, a year ago or so, where we talked about the ways to start to integrate this into your practice. And we give some more nuts and bolts suggestions. And I really recommend go watch that webinar. And I'm going to show you how to access that webinar coming up here in a few minutes. So that will give you some additional information. Please take advantage of it. The number two takeaway I want you to take home from today's webinar is this. Make the education investment. First of all, it's free. When you get AcuGraph, part of what we provide as our ongoing commitment to your success is a depth of educational material to teach you all facets of how to use this in your practice, how to succeed with it, what everything does, how it functions, and it's all free and it's all available for you. You go to AcuGraph.com/account, or inside the AcuGraph software, you just go up under the Help menu, and there's an item there that says AcuGraph User Resources. And guess what you can find? Obviously, the user resources. We've put a lot of time and effort into putting these resources together, and I think they are underutilized by almost all of our users who may not even be aware of what's there and what kind of help is available to them. There's some robust resources. So when you hit that, you log into your AcuGraph account on the web, and from there, you're going to get into the good stuff. So if you're new to AcuGraph, and I'm going to add, even if you're not new to AcuGraph, you should start here, because I think that there are likely things here you aren't aware of. And if you become aware, you're going to be really glad. So here's what you'll see in that portal. Notice there's kind of 5 different courses: the Getting Started, the Practice Management course, Reading Graphs, Talking to Patients, the Marketing, and Becoming an Expert. And each one of these courses has different information and materials, and it's designed to go through sequentially from one course to the next to take you to higher and higher levels of success. And this is all here for you. Let's go take a look at that. So this is, if you go to AcuGraph.com/account, you can see it right up here in the URL. This is what you'll see. And if you click on this link, or if you hit AcuGraph user resources from inside the AcuGraph program, either way, you'll end up on this web page. Click this link right here at the top. Click here to log into your service account. And when you do that, you will end up here. Now, this is my account. It says I have an AcuGraph Enterprise account. Notice the webinars button right there. If we click that webinars button, you've got all of these webinars here that are all available for you that you can get to and use. And I want you to scroll through and I want you to take a look. There's a lot of good information here. And if you don't recall, or if you haven't been to these webinars, it's worth your time to scroll through and see what is going to be most applicable to you. The one that I mentioned before, streamlining your practice with AcuGraph 5, right here. We'll talk about when and how to perform exams, how to get the workflow set up, how to get the most from AcuGraph, how to communicate. This is really a valuable webinar if you haven't been to that one. Now, along with the other items in the, along with the webinars, we've got these other courses. And I want to just take a minute and click through some of these. So if I click on the Getting Started 101 button, then I've got videos here, installation and setup. This is a 30-minute training to help you get installed and set up and ready to go. Here's a graphing tutorial. It's a 10-minute video, ready to go, ready to teach you. Join the Practitioner Mastermind group. We have a private Facebook group. It's quite active. People ask questions, give answers, share successes. I had a post on there yesterday, somebody working with a Russian Olympic athlete that was raving in a thick Russian accent about how much better this acupuncturist was because this acupuncturist had the machine and no other acupuncturist had the machine, which of course meant AcuGraph. So it's fun to have somebody that you can interact with, ask questions of, bounce ideas off of. If you're not part of that group and you're an AcuGraph 5 user, then you need to join the group. It's the AcuGraph users group on Facebook. And create your listing in your practitioner directory. So it takes you step by step through how to get started with AcuGraph. And then Practice Management 102. Similarly, we've got some webinars on practice management, the ones that we recommend. And then we've also got some blog posts on various topics for practice management that you're going to want to be aware of. The 103 level course, Understanding the Graphs, Communicating with Patients. We've got some tutoring here. We've got various blog posts again, some additional reading, some webinars. It's all here for you. So I won't bore you and take all the time to go through every one of these. But what I wanted to just point out is the resources that you've got available to you as an AcuGraph 5 user. I see a couple of questions. Can these resources be accessed by AcuGraph 4 users? And correct me if I'm wrong, those of my staff that are listening, but I believe this requires an AcuGraph 5 account to access these things. It's part of the AcuGraph 5 account, and the login and the maintaining it and all that is included with your AcuGraph 5. So no, AcuGraph 4 users don't have access to these resources, but most of them are specific to AcuGraph 5 anyway. So I'd recommend if you're still using 4, at some point you might want to look at using 5 so you have access to these things. I do want to point out the Marketing Your Practice, because here you can download the Media Marketing Kit. This will give you the AcuGraph logo, screenshots, video materials that you can put on your own website, social media tools to help you market your practice and let the world know that you have the machine. as the Russian patient said. We have some blog posts and tutorials about marketing and excellent tools to get out there and get more patients. So, point is, I want you to be aware of all of the resources that we make available to you, because I think they're underutilized by many AcuGraph users. So if you're not doing that, start doing that. I see Cameron answered that question specific to AcuGraph 5 service and support users. Thanks for answering that. I see Mary Jill also asked a question about treatment, and if you don't mind, we will get to that in the Q&A, because that's going to be a little bit lengthier of an answer. So Mary Jill, if you'll sit tight with us, we will get to your questions soon. All right, going back then, the second take home was take advantage of the free resources, get yourself educated. Whatever amount of time you spend investing in yourself to get the training and the knowledge you need, I promise you that is some of the most valuable time you can spend. It will pay off in your relationship with your patients, and it will pay off in your ability to have a successful practice and make a good income. Okay, and now we are down to number 3, the last take-home point from today's webinar. So we're almost there, folks. This is, I want you to focus on wellness patients. Turning your illness patients, or your patients that come to you with a problem, they're in pain, they're sick. We want them to not only come to you when they're sick. This is the cornerstone of a successful practice, because it gets you off the new patient treadmill. Now, let me say something about the new patient treadmill for just a minute. I have never seen anything as effective as AcuGraph at getting new patients. And if you need new patients, we have proven methods and ways. If you go out and do this, it flat works. Even if you are not good at talking to people and not good at marketing and you have no confidence, it doesn't matter. If you follow the step-by-step instructions, you can be successful at getting new patients. And if you happen to be really good at talking to people, you can be wildly successful. We see people go out and get, 10, 20, even 30 new patients from a single event. On the other hand, we see folks that only get 4 new patients. But what would 4 new patients do for your practice if you're struggling? That's important. However, my point is, we want to get you off the need to always be out there recruiting new patients. Wouldn't it be nice if you get to the point where your practice is self-sustaining, that you have enough patient flow coming in that you don't have to go out and do the marketing events? That's where you want to be. But you've got to be intentional about it. This does not happen by accident, and it does not happen just because you're a great acupuncturist or just because you use AcuGraph. You've got to actually do this intentionally and know what you're doing. So when you focus on wellness patients, one of the approaches, and I'm going to have Kimberly address this a little bit more, but one of the approaches is treating with packages, putting together a package plan. Something that Kimberly likes to do on the first visit is once you've explained how acupuncture works and set an expectation, then she focuses on saying, okay, we're going to want to treat you 3 times, and why don't we just sell you a package of all 3 of those treatments right now, give you a nice discount on that, and then we'll reevaluate. Kimberly, go ahead and why don't you give us a little bit more on that? I'm going to put you up on the screen, and why don't you talk to us about your approach and how you get wellness patients?
Perfect. So the way you get a wellness patient is you have to train them. And everyone who comes into the acupuncture clinic, they heard acupuncture might be a good fit for them. They've got this problem, and they come to you for the advice to find out if you can solve the problem. So when I have a patient who comes in and I graph them for the first time and I take a full evaluation, and I tell them right from the beginning, especially I treat a lot of chronic pain patients, and I tell them, I am willing to take you on as a patient. First, I hold on to that as myself. I am willing to take you on as a patient, but I will, in order for me to help you, it's going to take a series of visits. And acupuncture is progressive in nature. And I tell them that it doesn't mean that they won't they could receive results on the very first treatment, but more than likely the treatment will be progressive. And so I offer them two options. I have I always make everyone pay full price for the first visit, because a full first visit is a lot of time and it's a lot of effort and a lot of energy. And so I don't offer discounts there. But when I do multiple treatments, they ask me questions like, do you cover insurance? Will insurance cover this? I tell them that I am a cash-based business and that I do not deal with the insurance directly, but if they have insurance that they can, I will give them a receipt that they can submit themselves. But I tell them, but what I do for you is I offer you a discount in your treatment packages if you are needing multiple visits. So I offer a 3-pack, which gives $10 discount per visit. And then I do a 6-pack, which gives a $15 discount per visit. I do have them pay for all of those up front. I don't make them pay on the very first visit unless they want to. I will give them time to think about that for when they come in the next time. And when they come in the next time, they do a series. And the 3-pack is for those who are just really hesitant. And even if I'm hesitant on whether or not how well I can help them, I will tell them, let's do a series of 3 visits or 6 visits. And what I can guarantee you is, regardless of whether or not we can change your chief complaint, we can help with your energy level, your digestion, your moods, musculoskeletal tension. So it's not a waste of their time to invest in that series with me, but it helps me to recognize whether or not I can help their main chief complaint. Mm-hmm. And it gives me time to get creative. Because if you're on the line for, okay, fix me in 1 visit, or I'm not coming back to you and you're no good, I won't give them that option. I know that I have multiple treatment approaches. I might use microcurrent. I might use tendinal muscular channels. There are multiple approaches that I take, and that gives me time. The other thing that happens during a series of visits is I am constantly teaching my patient that symptoms are a direct relation to why you would call your acupuncture in the future. So I'm teaching them how to be a wellness patient. I'm teaching them what will happen after they're done, after we get them better, how we can keep them better. And I'm teaching them how to recognize when to call the acupuncturist again. And I'm teaching them how to send referrals. So there's a lot that happens in that 6 treatment series, but I take it seriously and my patients take it seriously. And almost always there's at least 1 referral that happens during that time. And I'm teaching them how to become a wellness patient so that they can be a patient for life.
So I have a question, Kimberly. Thank you, by the way, for that explanation. I have a couple of questions. I'm just going to put you on the spot here. This is unrehearsed, everybody. I'm going to put Kimberly on the spot. So question number 1. Were you scared when you started saying, hey, you know what, I want you to commit to 3 treatments or 6 treatments and pay for them up front? Were you scared that people were going to say no and that you would, lose patients over that?
I may have been a little afraid in the beginning because I think there's a different fear, though, that I could compare it to. The fear of, can I fix you in 1 visit? And are you going to walk away and say that I'm no good? I knew enough to know that I had enough experience that I had to have the ability to be creative in different ways in order to treat them. So that overrode the fear of having them pay money. And honestly, that made the biggest difference in all the world. As soon as patients started paying for a series, mm-hmm. Once they have already paid, they have no problem if I tell them, yeah, we need to see you again in 2 days, because the money's already been paid. I can treat them more often and closer together. And I started getting better results. And then there was always money in my bank account. Always. So
once you got them over the hurdle of actually writing the check, then they don't have to worry when you say, okay, come back, because it's already paid for. And the point at which you would start to encounter resistance around the 2nd or 3rd visit, you've already alleviated that.
Oh yeah, because they're already in the books. I actually book each of those appointments right in the beginning.
Okay.
And they say to me, well, I'm not really sure. I want to see if acupuncture is going to work. And I say, well, then I might not be the right acupuncturist for you. You probably need to go see someone else. I said, I work in a series because I know that the work that I can do is progressive in nature. So if you're willing to commit to a series of 3, then I'm willing to work on you.
Outstanding. Very cool. And that takes some self-confidence, doesn't it?
I guess, yeah.
But it pays off. All right, cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then whatever the second question was I was going to ask you, I've totally forgotten because I was so enthralled with your explanation about the first one. So, sorry?
You'll come back.
Yeah, I'll come back. Exactly. Let me go back to what I have on the presentation here. As Kimberly mentioned, one of the most important things that she does is package plans to help people realize that it is progressive in nature, and help them to commit to some care. And that happens generally, she hits them up for that when they are most impressed because they've just had a good experience. They're on their second visit. They've seen the graph change. So it's show and tell time. They can tell something's happening, even if they haven't seen real relief yet, although a lot of the time they have. But even if they haven't, they're favorably disposed to what's happening. And so that's a good time to talk about doing a treatment plan or a treatment package. You're working through the layers, and people need to understand that. That's another concept that Kimberly uses, is that, yeah, we can get you out of pain, but really we need to get down into the layers and address what caused the pain in the first place. Why did this happen to you? How are we going to undo the years of whatever, etc.? And people, once they understand that, and you've got a way to prove it by showing them on AcuGraph, they're a lot more willing to say, yeah, acupuncture is not an aspirin. Acupuncture is ultimately a way of life. So it's a long-term approach to health. And in all those cases, excuse me, the graph is the basis for the communication with the patient. So when you can show them, then they're a lot more inclined to accept. And they're a lot more inclined to understand they need occasional balancing and tune-up, because when they come to you, you can show them, oh, it's a good thing you came in. Look, yeah, you had some imbalances happening. We're going to take care of that. We're going to keep you feeling good. Monthly would be best, but even if they won't do monthly, then consider at the change of the seasons to help your body adapt to what's going on in the outside world. So item number 3, the focus on wellness patients. If you do that successfully, then you will end up with a practice that is full and busy and has a waiting list. And I remembered the question I was going to ask you, Kimberly. How long, if I call you today and say, I want to become a patient of yours, I saw you, I was referred by so-and-so, or I saw your website or whatever, I'd like to come in and see you. How soon can you get me in?
If you called today, it would be 4 weeks before I could get you in.
You have a 4-week waiting list.
I do.
And tell me, how many times per month are you out there beating the bushes for new patients?
Never. I don't have to beat the bush for new patients anymore. I started out by doing AcuGraph analysis. If I do a couple of presentations at networking groups twice a year, people already know what I do, and referrals are always coming in. In fact, what's happening right now, it's a change of season, and it's natural for patients to come in at a change of season just because they've been around here, they've been shoveling snow all winter, and now it's spring, and they've got some residual aches and pains, and they're preparing for summer. But my patients are so well trained that when they call me, they say, Kimberly, I haven't been in a while. I need to book a series with you so you could get me back in shape. So they already know that it takes a series of visits. They know the results of what they feel during that time. I trained them originally. And because I trained them originally, that's exactly what they ask for now. And it's exactly what they expect.
And so it's thank God for well-trained patients, right? That's outstanding. Thanks for sharing that. So we talked about Kimberly's practice basis. Thank you. I put her on the spot. Also, Kimberly has prepared this PDF on how to focus on wellness patients. You can get this for free. And if you'll bear with me 1 second, I will go ahead and put that up. And you should see a link right now coming up on your screen where you can just click and download this How to Create a Steady Stream of Profitable Wellness Patients. This outlines a little bit more about Kimberly's plan, how she does it. And fact is, you read this PDF, you're learning from an expert. She's got a 4-week waiting list. I don't know what else I can even say except do what Kimberly says to do. It flat works. All right, I'm going to go ahead and leave that offer up so people can download that. And no strings attached. It's just a PDF. Download it. We're not going to ask you for anything. We're not going to sell you anything. It's gonna tell you that you need to own AcuGraph, but probably you already do. So there we go.
Adrian?
Yes.
I just want to say that before I turned patients into wellness patients, I always had the fear of if I take time off, then I'm not going to make any money. And because I always have wellness patients, I can take a 2-week vacation and know that my wellness patients are going to pack themselves in before and after, and there's always room for the wellness patients. I can always pay my rent. I can always take care of my financial, whatever is going on, just because I have wellness patients on the books on a regular basis. So they become the bread and butter, and everything after that is bonus.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And, if you're only dealing with acute patients, so, somebody needs to get sick or get hurt before they'll come see you, then if you're out of town, you missed all of them. And then when you come back in town, you got to hope that somebody is sick or hurt because you've been gone for 2 weeks and didn't make any money. And now, but if you have wellness patients, you leave town knowing your schedule is already full. The day you set foot back in the office, you're busy and you're back to making an income.
And your wellness patients, those are the ones who absolutely love you. Those are the ones you're super excited to see them come in every month. Those are the ones where the heart of your practice is. That's what makes you love going to work every day. I mean, not that I don't enjoy a challenge and meeting new people who come into my clinic, but there's always those that you can help and those that you can't. But those wellness patients, they are your cheerleaders. They're the ones telling everyone in the world about who you are and what you do. And
yeah, they're posting you on Facebook.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we've hit the portion of the webinar. So I gave you the 3, I think, most important keys for AcuGraph success. Ooh, we're getting an echo. Are you hearing an echo, Kimberly?
No, but maybe if I turn my mic off.
Maybe mute your mic. Let's see what happens. Okay. I think that helped. Yeah. Okay. Those are the 3 most important keys as far as I'm concerned. You do those things, you're going to have a successful practice, and you will not be one of those failure statistics that I'm hearing way too many of. I want to see more successful acupuncturists out there. Hopefully you've downloaded the PDF, and now we've got Kimberly and me available. Ask us anything about whatever you want to know about succeeding with AcuGraph. And by the way, what did you think of the design of the slides, folks? Better looking webinar than I normally do. I'm really excited that we have actual designer now doing stuff for us. It's very one of those little milestones you reach in life where you just feel really excited.
Kind of like having a housekeeper, huh?
Yeah, well, I don't have that.
I do.
I wouldn't want to shortchange all my wife's efforts at that.
Kids, it's all your kids' efforts, right?
They do some, yes, depending on whether we can get them to. But let's go ahead and hit the Q&A. I see that we've already got some questions up here.
I'm going to answer Heidi's question.
Go ahead. Hit Heidi first.
So Heidi, you asked how long is your initial session and follow-up sessions? My initial session is 90 minutes. I book the patient. It's a 90-minute slot that isn't being overlapped by anyone else. So that's one of the reasons why it's hard to get in with me for that initial visit, because I need 90 minutes in order to treat them. So I do 90 minutes for the first session. In that session, I take the full evaluation. I graph them. I take a TCM evaluation. I train them about acupuncture and what I do and how I can help them. And it includes treatment as well. It's usually a pretty simple treatment on that first visit, because depending on how much time they are spending with me. And then follow-up visits are 60 minutes. I say on my website 45 to 60 minutes, but I have a hard time getting them out of there in 45 minutes. I have a patient coming in every half hour, and I have 2 treatment rooms, and I'm going back and forth between the 2 rooms. So on that first visit, I book the series of visits. So if there's 6 appointments that they're getting, all 6 of those are booked. They've paid for their initial. Oftentimes they've paid for the series of 6 as well, so that in the future, as I'm getting them in and out, I don't have to book them an appointment. I don't have to take their money. I just have to keep track. And I actually keep track right in the clinic notes. I put that they paid for a series on such and such a date, and today is visit 1 of 6. And then I just keep, I copy it and I paste it into the next notes and change it to 2 of 6, 3 of 6, 4 of 6. And as we get to visit 6, I tell them, okay, so let's evaluate. Let's see how far you've come. I show them the graph from the original graph and how things have progressed. We talk about internal symptoms that change, and then we move on from there. So there's a progress that's made.
And I know that the next question people are going to want to know, if you don't mind sharing, what do you charge for your first visit and what do you charge for follow-ups? Do you mind sharing that? Because people always want to know.
Sure. I charge $150 for the first visit, and I charge $85 for follow-ups. So if you have booked a series with me, you get a discount off of that $85. If you're just the random guy who shows up here and there without a series, you're a lot harder to work on, right? Because I'm not working with a series, you're just coming for an occasional tune-up. I charge full price for those visits.
Got it. Okay, we've got a bunch more questions coming in, so we're going to have to increase our speed of answering, and we'll keep it concise. We have Emma wants to know talk about the ion pump cords to Lev, the meridians. I assume treat the meridians.
Can I talk about this? I'm getting a lot of emails and questions regarding the ion pumping cords. The webinar that we did last month was an introduction to give you some information. So here's the bottom line on that. I learned about ion pumping cords and how to use them 1 week prior to that webinar. So in that webinar, I gave you the basics. We'll be teaching more about that at our symposium in May, and we'll ask Jake to expand more upon that later. And you won't be hearing any more from us regarding further deeper knowledge on that until after the webinar.
So, but we do have more stuff that we will be teaching on that. Absolutely. Okay, thanks. Let's see, scrolling, let's go back to the beginning here. Mary Jill, I think, was the first question that came in. She said, are you treating front and back and ear points?
You want me to answer?
Go ahead.
I have a large array of approaches that I take to treatment. I won't do all 3 of those. I might do ear points, or I might do front points, or I might do back points. With AcuGraph, you have a lot of choices and a lot of options, plenty of room for your own creativity. And when you come to the seminar in May, I'm going to I teach a segment each day, and I'll be talking about all of the different approaches and the creativity of how to treat based on the presentation of your patient on that day.
So it's unique to each patient.
Right.
Okay. William, I'll answer this one. AcuGraph asked me to remeasure splits. I hit no by mistake. How do I redo splits after mistakenly declining the option? Simple. While you're looking at the graph, there is an edit button. You can edit the graph. And so you just know which ones are split, hit edit graph, and then go remeasure the low side of each of those splits. So if you have 3 splits, note which side, either mentally remember it or just jot down which side is the low side on each one. Hit edit graph and remeasure only those. You can click in each window for the one that you want to measure. You can measure it and remeasure them manually like that. No problem at all.
Then hit save graph
and then hit save graph, yeah, at the end. And then you'll go back to the graph and you'll find that the new values, only the ones you changed will be in there. The others will remain. Dana says, Adrian, I have a question regarding charting using AcuGraph. I often want to add auriculotherapy points to my patient's chart, I cannot find them in AcuGraph. For example, how can I add the master oscillation point to a chart other than manually typing it in free-form note format? Dana, you're right. Right now, that's the only way you can do that. If it's not a recommended point in a treatment protocol, those you can just click and add. But others, there's not a library where you can click and add on the auricular points. And so, yeah, you're doing it right. Type it in. That is something that we might consider adding in the future because somebody like you took the time to ask us the question. Thank you. That helps us make the system better. Okay. Mary Jill says, okay, guys, after I like that. Okay, guys, after graphing someone, all the points possibilities come up and I find that I'm spending too much time with people, especially when these people are insurance covered, which pays me at best for 30 minutes. This is frustrating. What can I do? Oh, Kimberly's dying. Go ahead.
Okay. My first suggestion is we would love for you to come to Jose. There are so many options. You can pick and choose which way you want to treat.
Hey, Kimberly, you're cutting out and in, and we can't follow you. Try turning down your volume on your computer just a bit and see if that doesn't let your microphone stay on.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are many points and options in AcuGraph. You just have to make a decision. If your patient has musculoskeletal pain, treat them face down and use the back shoe points to balance the graph. If your patient, if you want to focus on auriculotherapy, treat the auriculotherapy points and balance the graph. You have many options. Don't be overwhelmed by all of the different choices. Just pick which one you're going to do that day to balance the graph.
Yeah, and you know, the process of choosing, we designed it in AcuGraph so that the process of choosing your points should be pretty quick. I mean, a minute or two max in designing your treatment plan and building that treatment plan. You can add, you can remove, all with just click, 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 and then get busy treating. But the goal is obviously the least number of points you can use and still be effective. Less is more. And so that's why you've got complete flexibility. But like Kimberly said, if you're not sure, then pick one of the options, go with it and get treating, but don't let it bog you down. Briggs says, do you graph your patient every treatment? If not, why not? I'll just say I recommend that. I know some people who don't. The reason I recommend it is because if you're treating them, they're changing every visit. Aren't they changing every visit? Of course. And so I recommend showing them that. There are some practitioners who will only graph every third visit or every sixth visit. And that's fine if that's how you want to practice. Then you're using AcuGraph more just as a show and tell tool and not as an integral part of the office visit. But do what works for you. Kimberly, what can you add?
I would like to add, if you are part of our AcuGraph Facebook user group, I would go there and I would look at a post that I showed just recently of a patient that I treated, I don't know, 4 or 5 times over the last 3 weeks. And I showed the progress of her graph each time. It's hugely powerful to be able to show your patient the progress of the graph. And like Adrian says, if you're using this for clinical purposes, the body changes every time and you have a slightly different focus as far as the root treatment each time. And if you're using it so that your patient can be convinced because of the science, then graph them and use that as the convincing nature to show them that the body changes and the graph changes as well.
In other words, it's a new paradigm. Use that paradigm, use it every time, and see if you don't end up with the kind of practice success that you want to have. Because we've got 4,000 AcuGraph users out there. We know a little bit about what works, and we're trying to share it with you. I've even had people say, I flat don't believe you, or I didn't believe you, but I tried doing what you said, or I tried using the AcuGraph recommended points, or whatever it is. And time and again, they come back and say, I never would have thought that would work, but I tried it, and guess what? It worked. And so that's what we're trying to do. We want you to be successful. All right. Any other questions? I don't see any others in the queue right now. So we'll give it about 30 seconds. If anybody else has anything to ask, go ahead and throw it in there right now. Meanwhile, I hope you all downloaded Kimberly's PDF. If you didn't, you can shoot us an email afterwards, ask for the link. We can send it to you. No big deal. But get out there and be the exception to the rule. There are a whole lot of acupuncturists that make a starvation wage trying to do this work, or that work part-time or work 2 jobs. But there's about 15% of acupuncturists that make a 6-figure income. Be part of the 15%, not because you're trying to get rich and not because you're taking advantage of people, but because you need to be successful so that you can help others and fulfill your calling in life. When you succeed, your patients succeed and lives are changed. It's all about the positive chi flow, including the money that flows in your practice and through your practice and back out into the world. If that is constrained, if that's stagnant, then you've got a practice problem. And we're trying to help you solve that. So Arlen says, oh, thank you for your time, patience, and professionalism. Oh, wow. Thank you, Arlen. That was very kind. I appreciate this. Dana, is this recorded? Yes, it is. Jose says, thank you. See you next time, I hope. Bye-bye. And with that, I think it's time to go ahead and close. Kimberly, anything to add?
Nope. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We'll see you next month, everybody.